Well, hello everyone. I'm Bill Johnson,
I'm Eddie Pasmiño.
and we are providing this software called Parti-Suite that is designed to move from nanoscale to pore scale trajectory simulations to continuum scale transport simulations. And so Eddie and I are going to talk to you about this software.
Okay, so the interactions that govern uh, between this colloid and collector are the DLBO interactions, and we call extended DLBO interactions will include the steric, Lewis acid base, and also we can incorporate the influence of layer systems and roughness. And the calculation of all these properties can be performed from fundamental parameters.
Okay, so we also have surface charge heterogeneity that we talk about quite a bit in the unfavorable simulations. And with respect to roughness, roughness decreases the interactions between the surfaces because of the reduced radius of curvature, but it cannot, in fact, because it reduces both repulsive and attractive interactions, it cannot flip repulsive interactions to attractive. It just reduces them all. And so that's what, in fact, drives the need to include surface charge heterogeneity in simulations to explain attachment under unfavorable conditions. So we have different geometries that we employ in order to obtain so-called collector efficiencies in these trajectory simulations. And this example system here that Eddie did quite a lot of experimental work on is the impinging jet, where we force flow normal to a surface to reflect the forward flow stagnation zone on a collector. It has the advantage of having a single focal plane on which you watch the colloids approach the surface, attach, and or detach. The disadvantage of this system is that the porosity is not well defined, and it is fixed in this system based on the physical experimental setup that one has. Kurt Van Ness solved to a much greater degree of accuracy the flow field in the impinging jet, and that's in his 2019 paper. Uh, Another collector set are realistic collector geometries in the sense that they are physically realistic. They are stackable so that you can create a series of these as a sort of a continuum representation of these collectors. And so the left side is the simple cubic packing, the right side is the dense cubic packing. They include grain to contacts explicitly. Their drawback, though, is that they represent specific porosities, about 0.45, 0.46 on the left in simple, and 0.27 on the right for dense cubic packing. The hemisphere and cell collector also explicitly includes a grain-to-grain contact that was developed by Ma et al. But unlike the other collectors that we showed, which have analytical flow fields, so that speeds the simulations, this one requires a numerical flow field, which slows down the simulations. It does allow, though, a range of porosities to be represented by the fluid shell thickness. And lastly, Huilian Ma, who is a research professor in my department, who has continued the colloid transport work, has recently solved simulations for non-spherical colloids, for rod-shaped colloids. And those simulations are available in Fortran, as are the ones in the dense cubic packing and the simple cubic packing, as well as in the hemisphere and cell. Impinging jet trajectory models, as well as a parallel plate trajectory model. The one that we've built all our Parti-Suite on and includes simulations in MATLAB in addition to Fortran is the Happel sphere and cell. And that's simply a solid grain surrounded by a fluid envelope, the thickness of which represents the porosity. The advantage of the Happel sphere and cell is that you can represent the range of porosities with the simple increase in the fluid shell thickness. The disadvantage is it's non-physical. You can't stack this to look at how trajectories may persist down a series of such collectors. Eddie, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah. So also the flow field is analytical, so it's pretty simple to solve it. And the real importance of the Hubble is colloid filtration theory was pretty much developed for this geometry, and also the initial scaling of how you uh, extrapolate the information for a Hubble sphere single unit cell geometry to a column scale, and that's what we can see right there.
Yeah, so what's happening is that in each collector passed, there is 1 minus eta cells that pass through. And that means that at the end of a series of collectors, the relative concentration, that coming out relative to that going in, is 1 minus eta to the power of the number of collectors. And if one takes a natural log of that and sets that equal to the simplified advection dispersion equation, assuming that dispersion has run its course and steady state conditions are achieved, one has a relationship then between the attachment rate coefficient and eta. And that's basically the simple upscaling that occurs in classic colloid filtration theory from the pore scale trajectory simulations with eta, and then the continuum scale rate constants with kf. Okay, so Eddie, you want to say a few words about what happens under unfavorable conditions without heterogeneity?
Yeah. So what we can see here is a result of simulations of individual colloids, a population of colloids in the Hubble sphere. And in the left panel, we have favorable conditions. And you can see how the colloids just approach to the surface, and when they're close enough, because the interaction is favorable, the colloid snaps into contact and is arrested in the surface of the collector. But under unfavorable conditions, simulations and the theory predicts zero attachment. The colloids may go really close to the surface. They may be associated in shorter separation distances, but never be coming to contact. And they may skin the surface during really long times, but theory predicts zero attachment. And that's one of the shortcomings of the classical colloid filtration theory.
Great. So we introduce heterogeneity in order to allow attachment under unfavorable conditions. And as shown here, recently Cesar Ron, who developed the layered system calculations for the XDLVO module, also has incorporated heterogeneity onto both the colloid surface to complement that on the collector surface. So the user has the option to use both or neither, or either one. And so that capability exists in the trajectory simulations. In addition, I want to make the point that Kurt Van Ness did a very nice job comparing experiments to simulations to really develop an improved approach for accounting for deformation and the arresting torque on the colloid at the surface. And I also want to mention that Anna Rasmussen, in her 2019 paper, developed the enhancement that roughness not only reduces colloid collector interactions and increases hydrodynamic drag at the surface, creates a slip layer, but it also creates multiple points of contact. And this is akin to what Changyang Shen and others have raised in terms of concavities on surfaces. Multiple points of contact are another way of expressing that, where the colloid is resting against multiple asperities, and that can create a longer lever arm of contact to the overall surface. And so the simulations in the trajectory model examine that lever arm, as described in Rasmussen et al. 2019, and determine whether it's longer than the single contact area lever arm, and uses the bigger lever arm of the two. So upscaling, in the case of the upscale continuum part of Parti-Suite, it uses the output from the trajectory simulations, and specifically the residence time distributions from the trajectory simulations for the colloids that reach the near surface. And so what it's doing is a similar upscaling to what is done conventionally, which is conventionally done at the surface using eta. What upscale does is it backs that out to the near surface. So that sphere that surrounds the grain surface and the near surface. Defining the near surface is the zone where colloid surface interactions become significant. We account for all the outcomes for colloids that reach the near surface, some of which attach, some of quickly, fast, some of which attach slowly, some of which are re-entrained back to the bulk fluid, and some of which translate to the rear flow stagnation zone due to secondary minimum attraction, and they remain in the rear flow stagnation zone. Um, so, but they don't attach. They simply are associated with the surface in that rear flow stagnation zone. And so the expressions shown below are rate coefficients that come from upscaling at that near surface boundary through these near surface efficiencies as described in Johnson et al. 2018 and 2020, both in ES and T. Eddie, you want to talk about the correlation equations?
Yes. So the correlation equations that we include in the software are oriented for favorable conditions. These correlation equations are extracted for a bunch of data from different authors, and the main representative ones are shown here in this plot. When you are plotting eta, which is the single collector efficiency, versus other parameters.
Correlation equations are heuristic equations that come from trajectory simulations. So all of these authors did perform trajectory simulations in either a Happlesphere cell or in the case of Long and Hilpert in randomly packed porous media, so larger. But because numerical simulation, it takes a while to set up, it's not accessible to everybody, they exported those results as heuristics. So the correlation equations are not empirical, they are heuristic descriptions of numerical mechanistic simulations. And so the way that this is set up on MATLAB is that people can vary the parameters quite easily that go into those heuristics to look at trends. So here you can see eta shows a minimum around 1 to 2 micron colloid size range. Okay, so we've got a large number of publications that underlie this, but the most recent ones are listed here. And as always, we encourage you to contact us with any questions that you may have.
Thank you, everybody.